This is the PR Podcast, a show about how public relations helps you tell your story to the world. We talk with great PR practitioners who have the skills, creativity, and just plain savvy to get their clients noticed. Now here's your host, Jody Fisher.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the PR Podcast. I'm Jody Fisher. Thanks for joining us. Well, can you believe this is episode 200 of the PR Podcast? In my wildest dreams, never thought that we would make it to 200 episodes of this show. I started off, I think it's maybe more than 4 years ago, doing this show on a weekly basis, and really started it um, because I thought it would be fun. And I still do it because I think it's fun. I don't monetize this show. I don't make any money off of this show. I created this show, and I do this show every week to talk with people I know and people I don't know, to have them share their ideas about how they communicate with the world, whether it's how they make the news, how they promote their clients, or tips and ideas about how they do their jobs better that we can all share with our community. I started this show, like I said, more than 4 years ago, here in the PR garage. It wasn't even the PR garage at that point. It was just my garage because I came out here during COVID, as everybody did. They looked for a place in their house or their apartment or wherever it was where they could work from home, work remotely during the pandemic, during the lockdown. And so I came out to the garage because, as I joke, it's the only place in my house that my rest of my family doesn't want to be. And so I at least had a private spot. And I set up on what was at the time my literal workbench with, a pegboard full of screwdrivers and hammers and, stuff that I used to, do projects around the house. And there I had my laptop and, whatever else I needed. And I worked, I did my day job. But I also started the podcast on that workbench. And I think it was one day that I just coined the phrase, the PR garage. And I kept using it and it stuck. And now whenever I talk to people, people say, "Hey, I see you in the PR garage." So this is the new PR garage. I don't know if you can see behind me. It got a bit of a facelift. I cleaned it out. I got rid of the old workbench. I put in, you can't see it here. You usually see it on my social media videos. Um, I put in a real desk. I'm sitting at a real desk now, with a monitor and everything else that I need to do my job. And then behind me there, I stripped out all of the old stuff that was hanging around the garage, and I put in some decent looking workbenches and things like that. And I hung an old TV on the wall just to make it a little nicer looking. And now this is where, I run my business from. And I'm almost 2 years into my own business, which is really exciting. But I still do the PR podcast every week right here from the PR garage. And this is still a hobby for me. 200 episodes in, I don't make any money off of this. I wouldn't mind making a little bit of money off of this. And I've thought about, monetizing it. But for now, I don't do that. I host this show every week because I love it. I host this show every week because I want to talk to people who know more than I do. And I want to learn from them, and I want to share their knowledge with you. Many of the people I speak with are my friends or people I know in the business, people who I work with, and I bring them on to share what they have taught me about what they do, about their job, whether they're an assignment editor, a reporter, a photographer, videographer, or maybe a fellow PR flack. Um, I bring people on who I either admire and know they have knowledge to impart, or people I don't know who I want to learn from and I want to learn more about them. And so hopefully we entertain you every week and bring you some interesting information and help you learn a little bit more about how the news gets made, which is the way I describe the show. This is a show about how the news gets made and how we communicate with the world on behalf of our clients and do our job a little bit better. Because, subtext here, and all the PR folks are going to raise their hands. We typically, our profession has a bit of a reputation. I think people really misunderstand what we do. And it's only because of the people in our profession who don't do their job very well. And I think it's a bad apples kind of a case, because the vast majority of us, I think, do an excellent job at promoting our clients in an authentic and legitimate way that is beneficial to the reporters we ask to do stories, for the communities that they serve, the audiences that they serve, and we pass along information that is interesting and relevant and important, to those audiences and to those communities. Um, all of that to say that I thought it would be interesting if, on the occasion of 200 episodes, we took a look back at some of the guests that have been on in the past 200 episodes. Now, we're not going all the way back to episode number one, with my friend Steve Hawili, who was a wonderful, wonderful man. And those of you who recognize that name know exactly who he is. Steve was our first guest. And I remember, I think I recorded it like on an iPhone. And at that time we were just doing audio. We weren't doing video as well. Now we have a YouTube channel too. Um, but we're going to revisit with a couple of guests who have been on in the more recent history. And you may recognize some of these names, you may recognize some of these conversations. And by no means is this an exhaustive list. It's just a few of the more than 150 people who have contributed their time and their talents to this show. So let's get into it. Our first look back down memory lane comes from Robert Shields. Now, Robert is, again, a friend of mine. He works as the one of the managing editors at my local newspaper here on Long Island called Newsday. Robert does an excellent job. If you really want to get a taste of what Robert, the kind of person Robert is, follow him on Twitter. Even though Twitter, the cesspool that it is, Robert is still one of those people who's holding down the fort over there on Twitter. And he's got a good Instagram as well. But check Robert out. Robert gave us some insight into how a newspaper newsroom operates, and specifically a newsroom like Newsday's, which is really on the cutting edge with digital, with video, with web, with social. And he talked a little bit, and I found this really interesting. He talked a little bit about the information that they have at their fingertips that helps them do their jobs better. Some of the behind the scenes information that they are able to gather about their readers, about the stories that they do, and about how that informs them to make better decisions. Take a listen to this.
A lot of it has to do with the change in the way that people consume news and what they're interested in, and that we now have metrics that tell us what our audience is interested in. Not that we just cater to those metrics, but we know in a nuanced fashion that these particular topics, there are some evergreens that'll always get the interest of the reader. Car crashes, blood, spectacular explosions, things like that. But when you get down to that next level where what are the readers willing to pay for? What is the information that they can get only from Newsday that is worth a subscription, that they can't get for free from Google? Because we all know the TV stations give away the news for free, and the New York Post has no paywall. But what can I learn about my county? So over the years, the philosophy of the newsroom has changed from, long-term investigations, which we still have, but pacing ourselves, having smaller investigations, smaller scope, that are you can publish more often than medium size, and then the really big ones, the long-term ones. In terms of topics to cover, we kind of refocused the newsroom to be about topics rather than general assignment. We've seen that people have a great desire in education news, in transportation news, in health news, in personal finance and their business, and also local business, as local as it gets. What's the trends? What's changing? We revamped our real estate section, both digitally and in print, to change the focus more towards a younger crowd, because we know, Long Island is an island of homes. That is our number one industry, is owning a home in Long Island. So they've changed the focus to make it more digital friendly for a younger audience that is struggling to buy a home, giving them tips, giving them direction, showing them places on the island where they might not be aware of, that it's a good place to live. We've also reinvented our Long Island Life section, which is kind of focusing on a new generation, the Gen Xers. It was focused towards boomers. Well, I can't use the word boomers, but it was focused towards an older audience and who once were the middle-aged people. But it's kind of refocusing it into a, you had kids, you still live here, you're still vibrant in your 50s, and the kids are gone out of the house. Now what? So we for the first time in my career, at least in the last 10 years, we have the ability to see what's causing people to subscribe. What kind of content? Is it video? We have metrics for everything, and it's not just unique visitors and page views. It's more nuanced.
So I found that one really interesting. I hope you did too. Um, Another guest that we had on recently, another friend of mine, Stacy Wallenstein, who is the Mint Chip Mama on social media. I brought her on to talk about social media and social media influencers. Now, we all have our own impression of what a social media influencer is, but Stacy brings her unique brand to the work that she does as a social media influencer and as a content creator on behalf of some of the brands that she works for. She is not an influencer that kind of holds up a product and says, hey, buy this. She puts her own takes her own unique approach to it. And I'll let her explain it here.
I introduce myself as a blogger and a content creator. I do not particularly like the word influencer because I feel like it's kind of trendy and fake, which it's not. But I feel that I approach my work, which I do consider a full-time job, as content creation for clients. I approach each of my, clients as a full-time client, like I would have in the 20 years plus I worked in corporate America, doing marketing, doing customer service, doing all of these things. Not to say that an influencer doesn't do that, but I like to say that I, create a story. I feel, obviously always in marketing, it's always about the story. And I feel very strongly that I want to tell the story of my brands, my partnerships. And I also want to find like that little hidden gem and secret that maybe you wouldn't know. So maybe you go to the store all the time, but you didn't know that, there's a hidden secret or story behind the owner or the store or where it was. So I love to kind of find those things out. And yeah, I just think that's fun.
Love that conversation with Stacy, and check out her episode. Just fumble a little bit backwards, or if you go on the YouTube channel, you can just punch in Stacy Wallenstein, Mint Chip Mama, the PR podcast, and you'll come up with her episode, and you can watch that whole thing. Another guest we talked with in the last 100 or so guests was a man named Mark Albert. Mark is a really smart guy. And if there's one thing I really love about this show is that I get to talk to people who are way smarter than me. And Mark is one of those people. It's not hard to be smarter than me, but Mark is way, way light years smarter than me. He runs a company called Media Advisory Experts. Now, he's an ex-journalist, as I am, as a lot of us are. And he talked about media prep. He talked about what an effective prep looks like, feels like, and how you execute great media prep. I'll let him doing the talking here, but check him out.
Every day in every newsroom in America, journalists are looking for experts. And guess what's happening? Every day, experts are looking for journalists. So let's bring them together, because so many people are reluctant to talk to journalists. They don't know how to do it. They might be a little bit nervous. But you know what? When the story breaks about the National Association of Realtors settlement, which changes the way we buy and sell homes in America, journalists are looking for realtors. And when it's almost tax season, guess what? Journalists are looking for financial advisors and tax experts and accountants. So I'm training people on how to talk to the media, how to craft a pitch, how to get a journalist's attention, and then how to make sure you're amplifying your message.
And just like Stacy's episode, go back and search for Mark's full episode of the PR podcast. It is a spectacular listen. And make sure you have your notepad out and take notes on what he has to say. Great stuff. The final guest I wanted to revisit here is someone who I just totally hit it off with, and I think she's fabulous. Kat Jones from Motiv PR. Now, Kat and I share a special love of all things geeky. She's a Comic-Con veteran. I'm a Comic-Con veteran. She does LA, I do New York. She's represented some very serious people in the pop culture and Comic-Con world. So I'm very jealous of her on that score. But she talked about something that we really connected on, which is having passion for your work, and how much better being in the tank for your clients can make your work for them. I'll let her explain it, but take a listen to this.
In previous years, when I first went, it was through my time at Marvel, which was kind of eye-opening, right? Being able to work with that type of company in that space. Early days of, the first Iron Man, that kind of stuff. You were really feeling the energy of like the comic book fandom expanding past, what was previously seen as just this geek world into like more mainstream, but in a way that was exciting, right? In a way that was accepting of that community. And so I will say, previous years, there were times in which I was like, it just didn't feel right. There were brands or companies that were really trying to shove themselves into the San Diego Comic-Con zeitgeist, because they saw such a a big community, and it just didn't, what they were trying to promote there, which just wasn't right. And I will say, it is back. Like, I was there for the first time in quite a few years. It really felt back to that, like the early times when they first announced, the first Avengers or something like that, when it was just that beating heart, that excitement, that palpable feeling was tangible, like everywhere you went. And yeah, I was there with a few clients, and I will say, the lead up, it's a lot of hard work, but then when you get there, for me, it turns into this like reunion of sorts. I get to see, past colleagues and friends, and who are just thriving now and doing, it's like we just said, like fellow geeks, right? Like, these are my people. These are the people I can just meld my brain with, and we can just bounce things off of each other, and I get to see them and see how well they're doing. And then just the community there. Yes, you are shoulder to shoulder. Yes, you are bumping into people nonstop, but you look around and you see the excitement on everybody's face, and you're like, yeah, this is how it's supposed to be. I wouldn't have it any other way.
So again, go back and listen to Kat's episode in full as well. Totally worth your time, and she was a great guest. Now, like I said, this is by no means an exhaustive list of former guests here on the PR podcast, but those four stood out for me in the last several months of guests that we've had on the show. Go back and take a listen to any of those folks, and the easiest way to do it, if you want to watch episodes of the PR podcast, is to look us up on YouTube. Go to the PR podcast on YouTube, and you can search for any of those episodes. Either the ones that we just talked about, the ones that we just introduced or reintroduced you to, as well as any of the other guests. Every guest who comes on the PR podcast teaches me something new or has a new take on something, and I just love having those conversations with them each week and bringing those conversations to you. 3, 2, 1. So like I said, some of just the great guests that we've had on the show this year, there are lots more. Each have shared something they're great at, and we want to hear from you as well. Make sure you pitch yourself to be a guest on an upcoming episode of the PR podcast. All you have to do is hit us up on any of the socials, DM us, or you can send an email to me, jody@jodyfisherpr.com. Send us the stuff. Don't just send us your bio, right? Send us the stuff you want to talk about. Send us like 3 sample questions. Hey, here's 3 things I'd love for you to ask me that I'm really good at. And of course, try to have something new, right? We don't just want to talk about how you pitch the media. We all know how to pitch the media, right? And we'd love it, especially if you are a newsroom decision maker, an assignment editor, a reporter, an anchor, a videographer, a photographer, a managing editor at a newspaper, anybody who plays a role in how the news gets covered, how the news gets made. We really want to hear from you because, like we've said at the top of each show, we want to pass on the knowledge that you have to the rest of our PR community so we can do our job better to help you, the reporters and the news community, do your jobs better. In any case, thank you so much for listening. Really appreciate you tuning in every week. And like I said, don't forget to check us out on YouTube. Please remember to subscribe to the show. Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at The PR Podcast, and send us a question or a comment. Our intro is by Christopher Apple. You can find him and his fantastic photography on Instagram at Christopher_APPOLDT. Check him out there and hire him for all your photography needs. You can find me online at Jody Fisher on all the socials and on the web at jodyfisherpr.com. We'll see you next time on the PR Podcast.